All right, so we're starting top of the outline with scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost. Real quickly, we need to make sure we understand that scarcity is like it's like the backbone of economics, the reason why we study economics, okay? And the definition for scarcity that we have to make sure we understand is that our wants are greater than the resources available. Wants are greater than our resources, okay? And that is why we study economics. There is not a question in this exam that deals directly with scarcity, but in most of the released exams that I have, there's one question that comes down to or gets back to this concept of scarcity in this definition. So just make sure that we are prepared for that. The other key term I really want to quickly go over is opportunity cost. And opportunity cost, by definition, is the idea that it's the best thing or the best alternative that is given up when a decision is made. So we'll just put here it's the best alternative given up. So every time we make a decision, there will be an opportunity cost. And you'll see the term opportunity cost or cost used a lot in econ examples and problems. And just remember that cost is always referring to the thing that is given up. It doesn't have to be a dollar amount. It can be. But sometimes, opportunity cost could be something as simple as giving up a certain amount of time. Other times, it's when we're talking about production possibilities or comparative advantage. The opportunity cost is the other good that we're giving up. Like if we're making Doritos and pizza, right? By the way, I had Jets Pizza for dinner tonight from the concession stand. Oh, solid dinner. And 2 boxes of popcorn. That's a good meal right there. So if you're gonna make more pizza, then you got to give up Doritos. So the opportunity cost could be Doritos or pizza, things like that. Okay, remember that definition though. All right, moving down to that was A, huh? Whoops. B, the production possibility curve. Production possibility curve, production possibility graph, same thing, okay? We need to make sure we understand that is the graph that represents all the ways, all the possible combinations that we can use our resources, okay? So we can put here it's a graph that represents or illustrates all ways to use resources. All right, now let's do this. Question. Just quickly take a look at question 2 from the exam that you picked up. That's the 2013 exam. Okay. 30 seconds. See if you can take a look at it. That's a great question about production possibilities. All right. Quick example of production possibility curve. Looking at this question, we need to make sure that we understand, okay? There are three, and this is pretty common to have a couple questions about production possibilities on the old exams. There are three questions in this exam. Question 2 being one of them. Any point inside the production possibility curve, without even looking at the answer choices, in your head you should already be thinking about that is, or that point represents an inefficient use of resources, right? And that's important that we understand that any point that falls inside our production possibility curve is a point that we can make that or attain that, but we're not making as much as we could. So we're not being efficient. And I don't even know what the answer is. C, associated with inefficient use. There you go. And remember, high unemployment is a great example of an inefficient use of resources, because when we have high unemployment, we have workers available that we are not using that want jobs. Okay, and so that's important for us to know. All right, skip ahead. Question 13. Number 13. Oh, this is great. This is good. If you don't have a chair, go in the art room right around the. Oh, it's all you. Got your name on it. All right. So the concept that's being illustrated, listen, concept being illustrated in question 13 is dealing with constant and, listen, hey, it's too loud right now. There's people that can't hear. If you don't want to listen, then go home, okay? I'm not going to yell over everybody. The concept that's being illustrated in question 13 is the idea about increasing and constant costs, okay? So if you look at my example up on the board, I have two production possibility graphs that they represent virtually the same thing, except the cost ratio between the goods that are being produced. Remember that the production possibility curve that is curved outward represents increasing costs, okay? Increasing. And the production possibility curve that has a straight line represents constant costs. Okay, and that is important for us to know. You look at this question, it's talking about giving up an ever-increasing amount of a different good. That's referring to increasing costs. So the best answer then is going to be your curve that is bowed outward. And just to help you, eliminate some answer choices, the only two production possibility curves that are taught in AP Econ are a straight line and a bowed outward curve. Okay? So all that other stuff, cross it off. Okay? That should be a 50-50 question right there. So hopefully that will help you out. All right, last question about production possibilities is question 38. Three questions on here about production possibilities. And real quick, we'll do this one together. Which of the following concepts can be illustrated using a production possibility graph? Okay? Choice, even though that's one that maybe that we don't talk to a lot, you can look at choice. The way you choose to use your resources can be illustrated. Scarcity for sure, because if it wasn't for scarcity, then we wouldn't have a production possibility curve. Okay? Price level is not illustrated or represented on the production possibility curve. Opportunity cost is. So the answer has to be D. Okay? Now, let's take a look. 1 second. Let's take a look at the graph on the left that I have up here. Okay? Opportunity cost is illustrated on this graph when we move or change our production from one point to another. So if we, increase our production of Doritos and we move from A to B, we are still being efficient, but we're giving up pizza to have more Doritos. And so whatever pizza we gave up, there would be the opportunity cost. That would be illustrated on that graph. Okay? Haley Larson. Oh, you know what? That's a great question. I don't know that. I haven't been told that, but I will look. I will look to see. Some of those courses have gone through a redesign, and maybe that's like a process of that redesign. Econ has not, but that still could have been taken off. So I'll let you know. Okay? All right. Questions about, listen up. Does anybody have any other questions about production possibilities at all that I can explain? One thing that I didn't cover about this graph is point D. Point D is an unattainable point, right? It's unattainable because we don't have the resources to produce anything that's outside of that curve, okay? One thing that we probably should have, but we didn't put down with the concept of scarcity. Scarcity happens because we have limited resources, and we categorize our resources as land, labor, and capital, right? Those are the factors of production, land, labor, capital. And the amount of land, labor, and capital that exists in an economy is what makes up that production possibility curve. Okay? And a different graph that we use or a different curve that we use later on in AP Econ that's basically the same thing as this production possibility curve is the LRAS. The LRAS and the production possibility curve are really, they represent the same thing, just on two different graphs. Okay, the LRAS, first semester students, long run aggregate supply. Okay, if I said that and you had no idea what I was talking about, you better be here on Thursday. We're going to talk about the LRAS. Okay. Okay. Questions? Production possibilities. Like that. Yeah. All right. Moving on. C. All right. Quickly take a look at question 46. Take a look at question 46. We'll give you, this is going to take you a minute. We'll give you a minute to go through it and look at it, and I'll put the example down on my screen. Anybody hot? Yeah? I got a fan we can put on. Can we do that? Can we put it in the window? Just on like whoa. Yeah, but we want cold air blowing in, Kukla. Just put it on like low. Can we do that? Here. Throw this over there. Will it reach? Oh, just put it on low, otherwise you won't be able to hear. All right, let's take a look at the problem. Let's quickly solve this, okay, before we look at the answer choices, and make sure that we remember how to tackle a comparative and absolute advanced problem. Real quick. All right. Quick refresher. Absolute advantage is the ability to outproduce. Country A has the absolute advantage in producing both computers and steel in this problem. Okay? Some questions are just looking to see if you understand that concept. That concept does show up in a few of these answers, and knowing what absolute advantage is will definitely help you eliminate some of the answer choices here. Okay? Comparative advantage, by definition, is the ability to produce at the lowest cost. Okay? Ability to produce at the lowest cost. To be able to figure that out, we got to do some math. Okay? Remember, when we have an output problem, this is an output problem because it shows us how much country A and B can produce. It's always output equals other over. Right? Oh, yeah. Like the Kool-Aid guy. All right, anyway. So now when I grade your FRQs and you're trying to solve these, you guys do all sorts of fun stuff. But what a lot of you don't do is you don't put your info in a chart like this consistently, and you need to use some labels in your chart so you know what it is that you're actually calculating. This is what I always do. One computer, because I'm in the computer box, is equal to other over, and I'm looking just at country A. So one computer equals other over, so that would just be 100 over 100, which would be one steel. Easy stuff, right? One steel, other over, one computer. And I was just looking at country A there. Now moving on to country B. One computer equals other over, 80 over 20 is 4 steel, and 1 steel is equal to 1/4 of a computer. If you label it, then you know exactly what your costs represent. So if you are asked, what does one computer cost country A? And you can say, in the computer box for country A, one computer, the cost is 1 steel. Okay? Or the cost for country B to make one computer is going to be 4 steel. Just so you understand what those numbers mean. Okay? Now, what's the right answer here? The right answer is B. So let's look through why that answer is right. So it says mutually advantageous trade can occur between the two countries when 2 units of steel from country B are exchanged for 1 computer from country A. Now, some students are going to see that, they're going to see those numbers, and their eyes are going to spin in circles, and their head's going to hit the desk, and they're done. Right? You don't even need to be able to do the math. The math is just to get you all wound up, get your panties in a bunch. Okay? You don't even need to be able to do it. Okay? You just need to know what comparative advantage is. So, if I look at my math here, okay, country A has the comparative advantage in producing computers because 1 steel is less than 4 steel. Okay? And country B has the comparative advantage in producing steel because 1 core computer is less than 1 computer. And when you look at the answer choice, A versus B, B says that, I got to read this here, 2 units of steel from country B. That's the only problem, or the only answer choice that uses country B to produce steel, which they have the comparative advantage in, right? And then it also says that country A is producing computers and exchanging those computers, which country A has the comparative advantage in. And so just knowing what comparative advantage means, you can answer that question. You do not need to be able to do the trade stuff to figure that out. Okay? I'm just trying to get your eyes to spin in circles. That's all. Don't fall for that trap. All right. Does anybody have any comparative advantage questions? I know what you're going to ask me. You want me to do a trade? Right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's take a look at the, listen, let's take a look at the trade that is being explained in this. Okay. So it says that, it says 1 unit of steel is being traded for 2 computers, right? So 1 steel for 2 computers, okay? Now, the way that I have that written, 1 steel for 2 computers, okay? I've got to figure out who is producing steel, which is country B, right? Country B produces steel. The trade has to be greater than the cost for it to be advantageous. So as long as I know that country B is producing steel, and I know that because they have the comparative advantage in steel, I compare this quarter computer to this right here, what they're getting in the trade. And since 2 computers is greater than 1 quarter, okay, then that is going to be advantageous for them. I feel like I did this wrong. Did I do it backwards? I did. I did it backwards. Crap. Hold on. Scratch that. It still works. Okay? I should have wrote this 2 steel for 1 computer. My fault. Okay? So now I'm actually going to start then with country A because I'm looking at what we are going to trade for 1 computer, and we need to get more than 1 steel, and here we're going to get 2 steel. So country A is going to accept that trade. Now I need to find what does 1 steel get me in this trade, which is 1/2 of a computer. How did I find that? I found the reciprocal. If 1 computer was traded for 2 steel, then 1 steel would be traded for 1/2 a computer. And since 1/2 a computer is greater than a quarter computer, then this works for both, and we got a trade. Okay? Now, if that is still confusing for you, listen. In the last unit, we covered this concept again, okay? And I will go over this again with a different example. Okay, I'll bring in my own example and I'll have it all and we'll go over it. Okay? So I'll have it again in the last review session. You'll get this. 4. Okay? All right. Last thing from Unit 1. Everybody take a look at question 8. Question 8. All right, now, this is a great question that is using just a supply and demand graph, not aggregate supply or aggregate demand, just supply and demand graph, okay? And the reason why I know that this is using just a supply and demand graph is because it's talking about price and quantity, not price level and real GDP, okay? Just price and in quantity. So to get this right, we have to understand that the flood is going to cause a decrease in supply, right? Flood can cause a negative supply shock, a decrease in supply. And anytime you're graphing supply and demand and you shift your supply curve to the left, what you'll see is price goes up, right? and the amount that is being produced and sold, because it says quantity sold here, is going to fall. So the answer should be increase, decrease, which is C. Okay? Simple. Understanding how to draw a quick sketch of a supply and demand graph will help you out. And understanding that when natural disasters happen, they influence the supply. And really that goes for aggregate supply or just the supply. Okay? Natural disasters are usually going to have a negative effect on the supply, which cause price to go up and the quantity to decrease. Couple things to remember about the supply and demand graph, okay? In your notes, I'm not going to write these all down, but you have a list of demand determinants that spell the word tribe and a list of supply determinants that spell the word rotten, okay? Now, I will say you should have just a basic idea of what those are. Do not spend all of your time memorizing those because you may see one question on the AP exam that will ask you to use those. May see one. You may not see any. Okay? So it's not worth your time to try to memorize all those. Get a general feel of what changes demand and what changes supply and be able to graph it and call it good. Okay? Now, some concepts that are probably a little more important to know about this graph. One, anytime the price is set above the equilibrium, we'll call it P1. When the price is set above the equilibrium, okay, that creates a surplus where the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. And a surplus happens anytime something is too expensive. Suppliers want to supply a lot of it. Buyers don't want to buy it. Bada boom, bada bing. Surplus. Okay? That means then that when the price is set too low, below equilibrium at, let's call it P2, you guessed it, that creates a shortage. When things are cheap, people can't get their hands on that stuff fast enough, right? We did not have a shortage of pizza tonight at the concession stand. They should have lowered the price. Okay? I ate what I took, but there was pizza left over, yes. So that's important to know. I see questions that use those concepts more than just understanding the actual determinants for supply and demand. Also, remember this. Okay? This is the graph that we use price floors and price ceilings. And in Econ, because everything seems backwards, floors are high, ceilings are low. Floors are high, ceilings are low. What that means is, if you're looking at the graph that I just drew up here, a price floor would be set above equilibrium. And a price floor would create a surplus. Okay? A price ceiling. Chairs are next door to the art room. You can bring them in. Okay? A price ceiling is going to be set below the equilibrium, and that creates a shortage because things are going to be cheaper. So those are concepts that are good to know. And again, in all the exams that you can look at, the practice exams, you will see maybe one question about this concept, supply and demand graph, a year. Maybe one a year. Okay? Not the most important stuff. Questions over anything with Unit 1? I just explained it all in 40 minutes. Not even. Half an hour. All right. Moving on. Unit 2. Moving on. Okay, now, quick thing. In the outline that I give you, the first thing on there is circular flow. hopefully some of you looked at your notes and you're like, what the what? I don't have circular flow in Unit 2. Yeah, we didn't do it in Unit 2. We did it in Unit 3, but we're going to cover it right now, and then we'll go back. Okay, so the circular flow diagram. Okay, I am not going to redraw that. I'm going to give you what you need to know about circular flow. So, first thing, we need to understand what the resource market in our economy is. Put resource market. And the resource market is where resources are bought and sold. But what we need to know is that in the resource market, households supply and businesses, also called firms sometimes, buy. So businesses are the buyer in the resource market, which hopefully makes a little bit of sense because businesses need resources to produce stuff. So they buy resources, households, they supply. What are our resources again? Land, labor, capital. Land, labor, capital. Okay? So those are our resources. That's what households are supplying. Now, the second market that we have to know, product market. How are we doing the second game? 1 down. In the product market, that is the market where products are bought and sold. And we need to know that households buy and businesses supply. You able to read my writing back there? Joey, how are we doing? You can read that? Way to go, man. All right. Resource and product market, okay? And remember, we use the circular flow diagram to track money flowing throughout the economy in exchange for either goods and services in the product market or resources in the resource market. Okay? Now, let's take a look at question 45. Question 45. We'll see what you remember here about the circular flow. Okay. Now, leaks and injections. These are dollars that are either leaving the normal circular flow between the resource and the product market, or they're dollars that are coming in. Every dollar that leaves has to be injected back into the economy somehow. Here are our injections: borrowing, government spending, and exports. Which means our leaks have to go with the injections. So the borrowing comes from savings. People save, other people borrow, right? Borrowing is saving. That's a leak and an injection. The government spending comes from taxes. And the export dollars come from imports. So the right answer for question 45 is imports, right? Isn't that, I don't know, I lost the question. E, imports. Good thing. When I see questions about circular flow, this is what the questions are about. Either about what's happening in the resource or product market, okay, or it's about the examples. You need to be able to pick which would be a leak or injection, just like this problem here, okay? This is not an uncommon problem. Not that you're going to see a lot of questions. It'd be one question, but a question like this is fairly common, where you have to actually know a specific leak or a specific injection, okay? I think the leaks are probably easier to figure out, and then you just figure out which injections go with the leaks, and I don't know. I guess it sounds easy. Questions? Just make it happen. That's right. At some point, autopilot kicks in, and you just know. All right. Second thing, GDP. All right, I'm going to write down the definition for this because I think it is super important for us to know. Dollar value of all new and final. That was bad. Where's my eraser? Ooh, look at that. New and final goods and services. Produced inside a country. It's got to be produced inside a country. Do we care who produces it? We do not care who produces it. It does not need to be a U.S. company. Okay, that's probably one of the most common errors that students run into when they're looking at questions about GDP. They think it has to be a U.S. company. It does not. It just needs to be produced inside the U.S. It has to be new, and it has to be final, which means it can't be used. It can't be used, and it can't be an intermediate good. Take a look at question. Yeah, intermediate, remember, is a good that's used to produce the final good. The ink inside your ink pen is an intermediate good. The pepperoni that was on my pizza, that intermediate. The real cheese that goes in making those Doritos, intermediate good. All right, question 23. Take a look about GDP. 23. As long as you know this definition, okay, you're going to see questions like question 23, and answers are pretty clear cut. As long as you keep this all in mind, okay, which means that the answer has to be C, right? It has to be C. All right. Moving on. Components of GDP. I think it's probably what I have repeated more. I don't know. I repeat a lot of things in class. I repeat this one a lot, though. The GDP components are C plus I plus G plus NX equals GDP. Now, what the whole purpose for these components, okay, is just to break down all the different types of spending that we add together to get the GDP using what we call the expenditure approach. Okay? The expenditure approach, just fancy for we're adding up all the dollars spent to get the GDP. We break them into these four components. Now, just remember, okay, C stands for consumer spending. The I, this is the one that students have the hardest time with. The I stands for investment spending. Okay? Investment spending is the same as business spending. And what is super important about investment spending is that it's spending on capital. Capital is one of our resources. And so when we have more capital, it can allow our economy to grow. G is government spending. This is why with fiscal policy, we talk about the government spending more or spending less. It automatically changes GDP and aggregate demand. Okay? Because government spending directly impacts GDP. And then net export is exports minus imports. Take a look at question 4. This refers to the components of GDP. You got to read carefully. So the only component of GDP that can increase to cause the GDP to fall is imports. Okay? Imports increase. That means that we're increasing a negative number, right? So the GDP falls. I've seen that question or that concept about an increase in imports, decreasing GDP. I've seen that asked on multiple released exams. Somebody thinks it's important to know. Yeah, I don't make it, but I'm just saying somebody somewhere thinks that that's an important concept. So there you go. All right, questions over components of GDP. Moving on. All right, real versus nominal GDP. So, maybe one of the things that students get flustered by more than anything is real and nominal GDP. Real, I just spent my afternoon grading a question that dealt with this concept, and you guys, your answers made my eyeballs spin in opposite directions. So real is adjusted for inflation. Now, what I mean by that is that when inflation happens, it doesn't change the real. When inflation happens, it doesn't change the real. Okay? The formula, or the best way I think to remember this, is real equals current production times base prices, which means that the prices don't change. Only production changes real GDP. Okay? So that must mean then that nominal is not adjusted. And would be equal to current production times current prices. You guys still read my writing? Barely. That's better than not. Okay. So just remember then that a change in price and a change in production changes nominal GDP. On the pretest that I gave my students right now from Unit 5, there were a couple of answers on that pretest that talked about, we knew that there was an increase in price level happening, but the answer was an increase in the nominal GDP. Whenever price level goes up or inflation happens, nominal GDP also goes up. The real does not change with inflation. Okay? Let's take a look at question 36. This is a doozy, in my opinion. With the emphasis on oozy. Um, 36. 36. Right. All right. Let's walk through this together. How can we rule out A and B? Because Joey says that year 2 is the base. Do we agree with Joey? Way to go. That was Joey Malone. So Joey's right. Year 2 is the base. Can we rule out any other answers easily? C? I would agree. You can rule out C. Can you tell the quality of goods by looking at GDP? Just the value, not the quality. So C, out. Can we rule out D or E? We probably can rule out E, right? Because if deflation was happening, then there would be probably, you can't rule out 100%, but it's probably not E. How do we know for sure it's D? It is the only one left, but how can we be sure that there was inflation during years 2 and 3? Think about this. Listen, what did we just say? What causes real GDP to increase? Production only causes real to increase. So what can we conclude if the nominal is going up by more than the real? What would be causing that to happen? Inflation. When nominal GDP goes up by more than real GDP, we must have inflation. That's what makes them different. Shh. Listen, if the real and the nominal were increasing by the same amount, what would happen to our numbers? They would be the same, right? The real and nominal change would be the same. So what makes them different is inflation. And that's why D has to be the answer then. Okay? But that question's a tough question. All right, moving on. Oh, one more thing. Yes, go ahead. Okay, great question. From that example, Darius, I see you over there. I haven't yelled at you in a few months. All right. So we know that year 2, people, you're wasting your own time. We know that year 2 is the base year because, remember, in the base year, the real and nominal value will always be the same. Okay? Or, and another way to, we don't have it here, but another way to remember the base year is that in the base year, the price index will always be 100. Price index will always be 100 in the base year. Okay? But also, it's when the nominal and the real are the same. Not so fast. Stay in your lane. It's coming up. Stay in your lane. Okay. Now I have one thing to add to real GDP. Okay. There is an additional way for us to calculate real GDP. And that is by taking the nominal GDP and dividing it by the GDP deflator times 100. Nominal divided by the deflator times 100 is a second way that you can calculate the real GDP. How do you know which formula to use? It just depends on the information that you're given. Okay? I know you don't like to hear that, but that's the best answer I got for you. Nominal divided by the deflator times 100 takes a nominal GDP and it deflates it. It removes the inflation and gives us the real. Okay? All right. Getting there. All right. Let's move on to price indexes. Indices. I'm going with a new blank sheet. Here we go. Price index. So there are two different price index tools that we use in this class. One of them is the CPI, and the other is the GDP deflator. Now, remember, a price index is just a tool that economists use to measure the inflation rate for a group of goods. And the group of goods that we are measuring, we call that, somebody got it, the market basket. The market basket is the group of goods that we are measuring. So the difference between the CPI and the GDP deflator is the market basket. They have a different market basket. The CPI market basket is all the things that your typical consumer is going to spend their money on. We take that group of goods and we measure how it changes over time. The deflator market basket is everything that's included in the GDP. So if you're thinking about this, okay, the GDP deflator market basket would take a huge market basket at Meijer to throw all that stuff in there, right? The CPI market basket would be like grabbing the small cart, you know. You don't need as big of a cart to fit all that stuff in the CPI market basket. It's a smaller group of goods, okay? But any price index is just a tool that we use to measure the inflation rate for a group of goods, okay? Now, how do you calculate the CPI and the GDP deflator? The CPI is equal to you got to remember this now, the current market basket divided by the base market basket times 100. You take the current value of that group of goods that you're measuring divided by the base value. How do you get the base value? Economists just pick 1 year as the base year, and they keep that year constant. Any year can be the base year. But when you pick a base year, you've got to keep it constant. That always stays as your base year. Current value divided by base value times 100 gives you your price index value. Okay? Now, the likelihood of having to actually calculate a price index, probably not going to happen. Super slim. Okay? But just understanding the concept is good. Olivia? No calculators. No calculators on the exam. Thank you for asking that. That's a great question. So we all know, no calculators. All right. Now, our GDP deflator, quiet, is equal to the nominal GDP divided by the real GDP. Whoa. Times 100. Nominal divided by the real times 100 is how you would calculate the deflator. And again, The likelihood of having to do that is slim. Okay? Most often, you'll be given the deflator, and you'll have to take a nominal value and divide it by the deflator to get the real. That's way more common than having to calculate the actual deflator. Okay? Questions? Hannah, did I answer your questions? All right, moving on. Here we go. Real and or nominal and real values. Now, these would be things like the real wage, nominal wage, real interest rate, nominal interest rate, that sort of thing. That's what we mean by real and nominal values. And just remember, if you are being asked for a real value, okay, your formula is always real equals nominal minus inflation. Real equals nominal minus inflation. Go get yourself a tattoo, okay? Get it on your arm. Don't forget it, okay? Real quick, just had this conversation with my my current students. Had some confusion. We were being asked about real interest rates. Okay, listen. When you are being asked about real interest rates, this is the formula you will use. Okay, unless you are being told to use a loanable funds graph, then you're going to go through determinants for that graph to determine the real, okay? But if they don't ask you to use the graph, then don't use the graph. This is the formula you use. Real equals nominal minus inflation. And that will help you out. All right, now, let's go to question 39. Actually, skip this. Let's use a minute ago. 39. This question is referring to the market basket, right? It's not using the term market basket, but that's what it's referring to. The market basket for CPI, this is the stuff that a specific group of things that your consumers spend their money on. Okay, so it's got to be D. Got to be D. If the question was asking for what GDP deflator measures, then it would have been, the prices of a specific group of goods and services included in the GDP, something like that. Okay? Yes, Larson. What's up with A? The value of current GDP in base year dollars. So that would be that would just be real GDP. Okay? Good question. All right. Moving on. We need to talk about who was hurt by inflation. Let's take a look at that a second. In your notes, it should say winners and losers. Where do you think they're going? All right. So the winners, those who benefit, the only winner is the borrower. And I hate that I call this winners and losers because it's really the easiest way to remember is that the borrower always benefits. Borrower benefits. Borrower benefits. Say that 100 times. You'll remember it. Not now. So remember, the borrower always benefits, which means then for the losers, the lender always loses because borrower and lender are opposite one another. Lender loses. Okay? The other losers are going to be savers and those that receive a fixed income. Those are retired people. Okay? They have a fixed income that they're trying to live off of. Inflation hurts them because then they run out of money. And that's not good when you don't have a job and you run out of money and you're 100. You got to go to Meijer. You got to work as a greeter. Okay. And don't tell me those people are nice, because they're not having a very good day. They're never very nice. No. They're not nice. Meijer is home of the grumpy greeter. Okay? All right. Anyway. Look at question 42. Great question. This one's a doozy as well. 42. It's a doozy. 4-2. Oh, look at that question. All right, let's take a look here. The answer, what is the answer? You check the answer key? Okay, so B is the answer, and listen up. The trick about this question is when we create our list of winners and losers, they are the winners and losers because of inflation. In this problem, do we have an inflation problem? No, we had the opposite, right? Prices were lower than expected, which means that your list of winners and losers get flip-flopped. Everybody tracking me there? Okay. So that's why the person that benefits, right, would be the lender. The lender benefits in this unique situation because we have less inflation. The list is all about when we have more inflation. Hey, we got 15 minutes. Stay focused. That's it. You didn't pay anything to come in here. All right. Questions over that? All right. Unemployment. Here we go. Remember, by definition, those that are unemployed are all individuals 16 and older that do not have a job but want a job. And we need to know that our unemployment rate, UE rate, is equal to the number of unemployed divided by the labor force times 100. Unemployment over the labor force, sorry. LF, labor force. What is the labor force? Employed plus unemployed. Those that are 16 or older, those that have a job, plus those that are classified as unemployed. If you are retired, are you in the labor force? No. Sometimes people look at it as a bad thing if you're not in the labor force. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We're just trying to calculate who is, employed and who is unemployed, and we're adding that together. That's it. Okay? So if you can remember that formula, that will give you the unemployment rate. Let's take a look at question 14. 14. So you can see here, okay, understanding how to calculate unemployment, got to know that, okay? You know the formula, And what that formula represents and means, that's going to help you. That's going to help you out. All right, moving down. Types of unemployment. 4 types. All right, structural. So let's go through this quickly by short and sweet explanation of each type of unemployment. Structural unemployment, those that are unemployed because jobs change. Okay? A lot of times structural unemployment happens because of technology or education. When technology and education change, okay, certain people aren't qualified or can't do the job anymore. They lose their job. They are structurally unemployed. One common, or I guess this is more of a current thing that can cause structural unemployment would be outsourcing. Okay, if it's become a part of a job structure that jobs get outsourced to other countries for a variety of reasons, that becomes a part of structural unemployment. And those people that lost jobs here are structurally unemployed. Okay, so structural deals with the structure of the job changing. Frictional deals with an individual change. Reasons why someone is frictionally unemployed: because they want to relocate, they want to change careers, they are just out of high school or college looking for a job, just out of the military looking for a job, just out of jail and looking for a job. Okay, those are all individual choices that make them unemployed, frictional unemployment. Seasonal, based on the seasons. Cyclical. Cyclical unemployment is the only type of unemployment that we want to be at zero, or that gets to zero. Okay? And cyclical unemployment happens when the economy changes, during recessionary gaps or inflationary gaps. When we go through the business cycles, okay, the unemployment changes, and that changes the cyclical unemployment rate. So if you were thinking recession, high unemployment, it's the cyclical unemployment that's high. During recession, during an inflationary gap, low unemployment, it's the cyclical unemployment that is not existent then. Okay? Take a look at question 26. 26. Best answer is A. Just like I said, most often structural unemployment happens because of changes in technology or changes to education. Okay? All right. Moving on. Our last thing, wow, we're going to get through all this, is the natural rate of unemployment. So the natural rate of unemployment. We know that it equals 4 to 6%, right? That's the unemployment rate at the natural rate of unemployment, okay? One thing I want to put down here, because I've had several students that have asked me questions about this, about the concept of full employment. So what we need to know is that full employment, by definition, is a level of production. So full employment is referring to a level of production when our economy is being efficient. Okay? So it's a level of production, we could say, at potential. When we're using all of our resources, that's when we're producing at full employment. The unemployment rate, when we're at full employment, is the natural rate of unemployment, which is 4 to 6%. Okay, so the full employment by definition, right, is a level of production. When we're producing at that level of production, the unemployment rate is going to be 4 to 6%. Yes. That makes sense? Okay. And the reason why I bring this up is because when you read a question, the question says that the economy is operating below full employment. That does not mean that the unemployment rate is below full employment. It means that you're producing at a production level, the GDP level, below your potential. Okay? The unemployment rate would be higher than 4 to 6% when the economy is operating below full employment. Yeah. I guess that's what that means. I don't know. All right. Anyway, one thing to add to this, okay? 4 to 6% equals frictional plus structural plus seasonal, which means that when we're at that 4 to 6% range, we have 0% cyclical unemployment. The 4 to 6% unemployment rate comes from adding together the number of frictional, structural, and seasonal workers together. Okay, and that's what we expect to have. Okay? 0% cyclical unemployment.